now. Alrighty, so gonna share my screen real quick. Give me 1 second. Alrighty, can you guys see my screen? Excellent, excellent. Alrighty, so first things first, we're going to be going over the practice exam that I uploaded to Piazza. This is just 15 pretty quick questions. We're just going to go through them real quick. Again, if you guys have any questions about any of these, just drop it in the chat and I'll answer them. I'm going to kind of just talk through these. I mean, the solution's already up, but I guess I can kind of generically ask you guys as well. So what do you guys think the answer to number 1 is? All right, we got C. That is correct. I mean, you can post this in the main chat. You don't have to direct message me the answer. Yeah, but it is C. Just to talk through why real quick, though, in case any of you are confused. For these types of questions, you should always work kind of inside to out. And so in this case, you have the type of 4 divided by 2, checking if it's equivalent to the type of 4 floor divided by 2. Even though 4 divided by 2 divides cleanly, this single division will always return a float. So this will be the type of 2.0, which is float, which is checking if it's equivalent to the type of 4 floor divided by 2, which is just 2 in ints. So it's going to be checking if a float is equivalent to an int, which it is not. So it is actually false, guys. Did I put that as the answer? Hold on. Okay, guys, I gave you the wrong answer in the answer key. That is my bad. I'm going to fix that. All right, so this is actually false, guys. Yeah, I'm gonna fix this. Don't worry, guys. I'm glad we talked this out together. You guys would have been so this practice midterm is going to be on this midterm 1 study session. I'm going to update this one as soon as this session is over with the correct answer for question 1 because it is supposed to be D. So I'm going back, pretending that didn't happen. Yeah, so it does return false. So just working inside and out, just knowing that even if it cleanly divides, it's going to return a float is what the main thing is here. Do any of you guys have questions on number 1? All right, yes. So yeah, they're 2 different types. They're not equivalents. So moving on to question 2. The following code will produce an error, true or false. Assume the user inputs 3 and 4. What are you guys thinking? So it looks like everybody thinks false. That is correct. This will not produce an error. Just really quickly, I'm going to check that okay, so that answer is correct on the answer key. Excellent, excellent. So you can multiply a string with an integer in Python. So what this would do is, obviously, since x's input is going to be a string by default, so when the user inputs 3 first, it will be this excuse me, it'll be the string 3. Then when they enter y, or the next input, it'll be the integer 4. When you multiply the string 3 by the integer 4, what that will do is that will just concatenate it. That will just concatenate it 4 times or 3 times. So in this case, you will have, I'll type in the chat real quick, you have the string 3 multiplied by the integer 4. That is going to equal just that string concatenated 3 times. So you can multiply, and I just sent that to a direct message to somebody, so give me 1 sec. All right. So if you have the string 3 multiplied by the int 4, that will result in just that string being concatenated 4 times. This works for other things as well. Like, let's say you had the string ying, you multiply it by, let's say, 2. That is going to just squish that together 3 times. So it's just repeatedly multiplying those together. Yeah, 3 is a string. Yeah, so there was a question asked. Well, okay, so that example I just gave with Ying, that Y auto-corrected to a capital Y wouldn't be capital. But yeah, so people are wondering 3 is a string. So when you just have by default X equals inputs, anything you enter will be a string. Every single input you enter will be by default a string. So that's why you often see these types of things like these wrappers. So you see an int or a float or whatever you want it to be outside of the input, so you can convert it automatically. But in this case, 3 would be a string by default. So it looks like you guys kind of got that under control. Just going to check the questions real quick. All right. So anybody have, okay, so we have a raised hand. I mean, you can type your question in the, you can send me a direct message or like, you know, just type it in the chat. I'll answer your question. So yes, Warren's question, input equals string. Yeah, by default, the input would equal just a string. So even if you entered 4, like the int 4, it would be a string. If you entered 4.0, it would be the string 4.0. We still have somebody raising their hands. I'm not going to be unmuting anybody just for the sake of time, but at any time you can send me a question either directly or in the chat. So anybody have any questions on this specific question here? Alrighty, moving on to question 3. For any Boolean value b, the expression b or not b is always true. So we have some people saying false. Somebody says, is there a type that would make 2 false? So going back to question 2, somebody asked if there would be like something that could make 2 false. I mean, technically you could give an input that would create an error. Like let's say, since y is equaling an integer, if you tried feeding it in like the word apple, then you can't convert the string apple into an integer, so you would get an error there that would crash it. But we assumed the user's entering 3 and 4, so we're good. So it looks like we have some conflicting answers here for question 3. So for these types of questions, you should really just plug in a Boolean value for the whatever expression it gives you. So let's plug in true. So what is true or not true? That is true or false, which is true. So that evaluates the true, and the only other Boolean value is false. So false or not false is false or true, which is true. So the answer is A, which is true. You should just plug and chug values here, since especially there are only 2 Boolean values. This will always result in true, especially because of this not and this or. The or indicates only one of these has to be true, and this not will ensure that only one will be true. Okay, so we're asking somebody's asking to type it out real quick. Can you guys see my my little coding thing I just pulled up here? Okay. Let's just create a new file. Or wait, I'm just gonna open up a terminal. Give me 1 second, guys. For or, everything is true except false or false. That is correct. Only one side needs to be true for that. For and, both sides needs to be true. Okay, so to type this out, we have the expression, what, b or not b. This is always going to be true. So let's say we have the instance where b equals true. We have true or not true. We simplify this first, since this is already broken down to a Boolean value. Not true is going to be equal to false. So we have true or false. True is true, so that simplifies to true. Down here, if we have b equal to false, it's kind of the same logic where we have false or not false. Then we have that which simply goes to false or true, which evaluates to true. So both of these are always going to be true. Does this make sense to everybody? So if you're given some expressions and saying like, oh, for any Boolean value, just like plug and chug. So somebody says not really. So What do you specifically like have? I see. Okay, so do you have any like specific things? Like specific questions on what you're not understanding about this? Because we do have plenty of time. There's really no rush here. There are no stupid questions. Because when I was in 112, I was also struggling. You're saying the same words over and over, but it's not clicking. Can you show how this concepts with runnable code? Okay, so yeah, we'll create a function for this. That's a good idea. So I'm just going to comment this out. So let's call def, I think this was problem 3. So we'll just call problem 3. And then it takes in a parameter b. And we're just going to straight up return the expression, b or not b. I mean, this is kind of just, this is literally just the expression that is asking you to solve. So it's kind of hard to show, I guess, how this would work. But if I was to call this, so if I was to print the return value of problem 3, pass in true, and then I was to do the same thing with false. What this will do here, if I was to run this code, it would just return true twice because, again, true will be passed in as b, so it will say true or not true. True, I mean, to be honest, right here, every time, as soon as it sees that b is true, it's not even going to read this second expression because Python will just optimize it like that. As soon as it sees that one side is true and this is an or, it's not even going to bother with this other side. But if the false is passed in, so we have false or not false, the not will change it to true. And since it's false or true, one of the sides is true, so that's going to return true. Okay, so we have somebody talking about math. I tried to not talk about math. But yeah, if that helps, I mean, think about math if that helps you. Again, this will be uploaded, so maybe just rewatching me talk about it could help. But again, just try plugging and chugging it on the exam if there's anything like this. So are we good to move on to the next question, or should we spend some more time on this? Alrighty, it is time to move on. So, question 4, which of the following is logically equivalent to this? X equals y equals z. What do we think, guys? We got a lot of D's. Any other answers out there? Any bold people think it's not D? All right, well, this one was pretty straightforward. It is D. Since this confirms that x is equal to y and y is equal to z, therefore z is equal to x, you need to have this and here while confirming that they're both equal as well. So D is correct. I'm not really going to spend much time on that one. Does anybody have any questions on this one? You can direct message me. Your name will be secret to everybody except me. I won't expose you. You're good. All right. So I'm going to move on to question 5. What is printed with the following code? We got C18, got a bunch of people saying C, got a bunch of people saying 18, got one person saying D with a typo to C. We got more C's. Okay, so yeah, this is C. This is supposed to be kind of like a quote-unquote trick question because you might see this and think, oh, am I supposed to multiply first because of PEMDAS? But no. Anytime the assignment operator has an arithmetic with it, you're always going to solve the entire expression first and then multiply it with what's x. Are you guys familiar with the syntax, though, this whole times equals things? Okay, just to be sure, in case there's a single person out there that doesn't know it, I'm going to drop it real quick. So you can do this for any arithmetic. So that's plus, minus, divide, equal, or divide, subtraction. Wait, plus, minus, divide, multiplication. There we go. So you can either say x equals x plus 1, which is equivalent to x plus equals 1. So you can do this with, if you wanted to divide, it would just be divide equals 1, multiply, all that stuff. So that's all it's doing. Questions would be, so for multiple choice, I'd say your best bet is going to be something like Zybooks or just studying off your slides, making sure you know the nooks and crannies. For coding, I'll show you a website that I used when I was in 112 to help. But it does give basic examples. Also, I will say that YouTube channel that drops the solution videos to labs, I have left, like I've been a TA for years now, and I've left every single one of those up, and those are all coding questions from CS112, and they're like, I think 70 videos, so you can parse through those and find some stuff. Somebody asked where. So I'm going to be uploading this video on this Piazza post as a YouTube link, and that YouTube channel will be the one that has all those videos. So once that is up, I mean, you guys will have it. But also, if you just go to Piazza and type in solution video, all the solution videos are also part of that YouTube channel. Thank you for the subs, guys. Appreciate it. All right. So what is the output of the following code? So this one's supposed to be a tricky one. So what do you guys think the answer is to 6? We got A, we got B, we got B, we got C, and we got D. So we got absolutely every answer on this one. I'll give you guys like 30 more seconds or like 10 more seconds. Do we have any more answers? We have another D, a C. We got somebody switching to B. All right, so the answer is going to be A. So one person got it right. Everybody else would have failed this exam. So why is it A? So we are going to go through this code in my in the actual thing here. Let me just copy it real quick. I'll just make a split screen. Can you guys see both my screens right now? Cool. So this is actually a question I've directly seen off of a midterm. So obviously they use other things like not hot dog and dumpling, but you know, it's very similar. The logic is there. So this has to do with how Python evaluates Booleans. And let me just finish typing real quick. All right, so we called it with what? We called it with prac 4, we called it with prac 5, and we called it with prac 6. So the reason why you can actually pass in absolutely anything here that, assuming you have proper syntax, and it will always print hot dog. There's not a single value you could pass in that will print dumpling, actually. The reason being that the way that this is constructed. So let's say the string 4 is passed in, okay? So x is 4, it's going to check this. So this right now is going to be 4. Does the string 4 equal the integer 4? What do you guys think? No, it doesn't. So this will become false. So this side has been false. And then it will check or 5. 5 is not being compared to anything. In Python, any non-zero value is considered true. So this could be 5, this could be 60, this could be the string like arms and legs. It could be -1. As long as it's not 0, this will be true. So it will always enter here. That is weird, but it is going to that, like I've seen this on so many midterms. So make sure you guys really understand that. It is kind of goofy. I agree. All right, so hopefully this all makes sense to you guys. You can write it down. I'm also uploading this to this, like I'm recording this session, so just to show you guys it works, prints hot dog 3 times, no matter what input. We can pass in any input, and because of this or 5, this non-zero value, this will always evaluate to true, and it will always go to hot dog. So to clarify, if any Boolean is compared to any value, string, or integer, or float, it will evaluate as true. So yes, but if by that you mean just like straight up, when you say compared, I'm not like you're not actually comparing it using the like equality operator or like greater than or less than. If it's just like if 5, that's always going to be true. If it's like if -1, if 60, that's always going to be true. If you were to call 0, would it print dumpling? So yes, if the 5 was 0 instead, it would print dumpling. That is correct. Why 3 times? Somebody asked. Because I'm calling the function 3 times. So this is the first print statement, this is the second, and this is the third. So it's about the if, not the Boolean. So yes, I guess that's a way to think about it. Yeah, so somebody brought up, this is really buggy code. In order to make this actually work, you'd have to say x equals 5 as well. That's like how the code was supposed to work, but the person who types this up didn't know that non-zero values are true. Wait, can you explain the weird bit one more time, please? Okay, so I'll just kind of walk through the logic behind this. So any non-zero value in Python is going to evaluate to true. So the fact that this is an OR and this is not 0, it's going to be true every single time. So actually something else I'll mention is that counts for all like empty things too. So an empty list will also be considered false. An empty tuple, those are also false. But a list that has anything in it, even another list, will be true. So it's just any non-zero or non-empty values, I should say. If it was 0, would it print dumpling? Yes. So if it was 0, the dumpling would be printed. So in fact, now that this, let's say we changed it to this, what would the output be? We have a dumpling. We have dumpling 3 times, yes, because none of these will evaluate to true. This is always going to be false, and none of these inputs equal 4. So we'll just print dumpling 3 times because we call the function 3 times. What about x equals 4? What does that signify? So the first question I'm going to answer is what about x equals 4? What does that signify? This is comparing the input x to see if it's equal to the integer 4. The string 4 does not equal the integer 4. Those are 2 different data types. They do not mean the same thing in Python. The next question, hold on. I saw another question there. So 0 equals false, and so it's any number other than false. So -1, -2, 40, any non-zero value. I hope I didn't miss any questions. I'm kind of trying to scroll through right now. All right, I don't think I missed any questions, but if I did, just feel free to type them up again real quick and I'll answer them. Alrighty, again, I will be uploading this to Piazza shortly after this is over. So that is actually the end of the multiple choice. Now we have a couple short answers. That's really going to... So I have all of the answers here for some reason. So that's my bad. But let's just talk about modulus real quick since you guys already know the answers. So when we have modulus, if it's ever a small number modulating a big number, it is just going to return that small number. So what would 4 modulus 50 be? 4, yes. So anytime it's small mod big, it's just going to return the small number. Every time it's big modulus small, that's when it's actually going to find the remainder. So in this case, 3 goes up to 25. It goes to up to 24 without passing 25. 25 minus 24 has the remainder of 1. Yes. S modulus B equals S, if that makes sense to you guys. Now 0 modulus 3, this again follows the rule of 0 being smaller than 3, so it's just going to return the smaller number. 3 modulus 0, yes, this is going to be an error because this is similar to the 0 division error. You also cannot modulate by 0. So this could be a question on your exam asking what the output is, but now you know it's going to be an error because you cannot modulate by 0. Any questions on modulus? I think this literally covers like everything for modulus. So when you need to actually find the remainder, when a small mod big just returns small, you can modulate by 0 if 0 is the first argument, and you cannot modulate by 0 if it's the second argument. So no, the floor divide, and okay, so hold on, real quick. Somebody wants me to talk about 10 again. So this is kind of the actual functionality of how you're supposed to use modulus, which finds the remainder of the right-hand argument going into the left-hand argument. So you want to check how many times this argument can go into this argument without going over it. And we know that 3 can go into 25 without exceeding 25 8 times, and that becomes 24, and 25 minus 24 equals 1. Now, granted, if it was 25 modulus 5, that would be 0 because it would go in a perfect amount of times. So I just explained 25 mod 3. Do you want me to? Does anybody want me to explain that again? Okay, cool. And somebody asked, are the floor division and modulus the same thing? So they're talking about the floor division versus the modulus. Modulus finds the remainder, as we just described here, whereas this is just the floor division. So it will divide two numbers and just completely remove any decimal and convert that to an integer. So those are two different things. Alrighty, any last minute questions before we move on to coding on any of these? Again, this is available on Piazza on that midterm thing. Yes, so floor division will always return an integer even if it doesn't evenly divide. So this actually is, for those of you who came late, this actually has to do with question 1. So here, the answer is going to be D, false, because the type returns by the single division is always going to be a float. Even though this cleanly divides, it's going to be 2.0, and this will give you 2. So this will be the type of a float equaling the type of an integer, which gives you false. So this is, even if this wasn't like clean, so it was 4 divided by 3, it would still give you an integer. This will always give you a float. This will always give you an integer. Yeah, so division, the single division always returns a float. This will be 2.0, even if it's clean. It gives you a float, but it is dividing two ints. Yes, that's just how it works in Python. I've actually seen this question as well in a midterm. All right, so we have somebody asking, so 4 floor divided by 5 gives you 0, and 5 floor divided by 4 gives you 1. What do you guys think about this? I want you guys to really think about this. Pretend this is an exam question. All right, so it looks like some people are saying no, some people are saying yes. But yeah, what do you say? Yeah, so 4 floor divided by 5 will give you 0. So 4 floor divided by 5 will equal 0. And the other will equal 1. So 5 floor divided by 4 equals 1. That logic is correct. Because this will become a decimal, right? And that's just going to be like 0. This will be like 1 point something, so it's just going to give you 1. All right, so any more questions on the short or the multiple choice? Again, I have recorded me going over all of these. This will be uploaded after the session. I think this was kind of the one that got most people. What is the answer to number 1? I wasn't here when you went over it. I'll just quickly talk about it real quick. The answer to number 1 is D, false. I will say, though, the answer key at the bottom does have a typo. I'm going to fix that. So I put C. It is not C. The answer is D, because this checks the type of 4 divided by 2, checking if it's equivalent to the type of 4 floor divided by 2, which is going to be floats and ints which are not equal. Yeah, what one student said about the difference between the two, floor dividing and modulus, that's good. D mod 10 is last digit. Yes, if you want to find the last digit of a number, D, then just modulating it by 10 will snag that last digit. What's the difference between for A and C. Okay, so this is a string, and this is a Boolean value. So this does not mean what this means. This actually means true or false. This is just a string. So this is just a plain old string. Like, this is a string here that says, please enter number 1. This does not contain the same thing as true and false. In fact, both of these would evaluate to true, right? Because they're non-empty strings. An empty string is false. Both of these would be true. If you said like if false, like if the string false, it would be true. Any more questions on this? Where can we find this midterm? Yeah, so the Piazza posts, that is right here. It's pinned to the top. It's called Midterm 1 Study Sessions. I have the practice exam as well as the coding file uploaded here. I will be editing this because my answer key is actually wrong. My bad. But I'm going to change that shortly after the session's over. This is the code that we went through for the coding solutions. So this is where you'll find it. I'll actually literally just add it to this follow-up discussion here shortly after the thing. So there's going to be a video of me going through everything as well as the files that we're going through today. So no need to try to copy everything down. So it ties back to number 3. I believe the whole point. Yeah. So really understanding Booleans and how they work. These questions do kind of tie together. Going back to if any non-zero or empty value is true, how does that rule apply to strings? So an empty string is false. So if you consider any container, you can kind of see a string like a container of characters. It's going to be empty, and that will be false. I guess a real quick question I'm going to ask before we go on to coding is what are strings mutable or are they immutable? They are immutable, which means they cannot be changed. So immutable with an I, unmutable is not a word. Yeah, so that literally just means you cannot change. So I'm sure as you guys know that if you had this string, let's say Jing, you can view this as a list of characters. So if you had a for loop, let's say saying for I in X, you can literally print out I, and that will actually print out J, and then I, and then N, and then G. You can see this as a list of characters. The reason I say like a list of characters is because this is immutable. So if you had an actual list of characters that was similar to this, so let's say J, and then I, and then, what is this, N, and then G, you can directly say something like, if you wanted to change the I to a $sign, you can say Y at 1 equals a $sign, and then this elements would actually change to a $sign. However, here you cannot say Y at 1 equals something else because they are immutable. You cannot change this. Does that make sense to everybody? You can index it though. So if you wanted to see what it was at Y1 and printed it out of X, it would print out I, but you cannot change it. It is immutable. I didn't catch most of it. All right, I'll go over it again real quick, but again, this will be uploaded. So strings can be seen as a list of characters, but they're not exactly the same because strings are immutable. So for instance here, you can iterate through this string where every character is going to be an element. So for I and X would print out J during the first iteration, then I, then N, then G. However, if you wanted to change like I to be a $sign, you cannot do that for X because X is a string. If you had an actual list of characters though, and you wanted to change the I to a $sign, you can directly say Y1 equals X because 0, 1 equals the $sign. And you can change a list. Lists are mutable. Okay, so why is a list of characters numbered from 0 to n and not 1 to n? So that's just every container in any programming language. Well, I'm not going to say any. In most popular programming languages, you're always going to have it start at 0 and go all the way to wherever it is. For those, like for any container. So if I was to print out x0, that would print out j. If I was to print out x, what would happen if I printed out x negative 1? Do you guys know? Yeah, so you can negative index. So negative 2 would be n, negative 3 would be I, and negative 4 would be j. Yes. So you can index this, but you can't say something like x0 equals like r. That is not possible. You cannot change a string's value like that. If you did -5, would you get an error? What do you guys think? If that was an exam question right now, what would happen? Would you guys fail the test or would you pass the test? We got out of range. We get, all right, so everybody thinks it gets an error. Let's find this out. So we're saying, well, we're just trying to view the -5th index. All right, so we're just going to print that out. So prints x at -5. We got a drum roll. I would have put G. So if somebody thinks that -5 is G, so they think it wraps around. Okay. Drum roll. We got an error. So that one person would have failed. Would trying to change an index string yield an error? So I'm not sure what you mean by change a index string. Could you kind of expand on that, please? Sorry, an index in a string. So if you did it, yeah, you cannot do that. That's part of the whole lists are immutable thing. So if I control Z a bunch of times, yeah, this right here would yield an error. You cannot change anything in a string. If you had an actual list of characters, sure, you can do that, but you cannot do that like for a string. You can use the if thing you taught us, right? I'm not sure what you're talking about by the if thing, but sure. Oh, if I equals I, then change it to a $sign. Yeah, so that's, are you talking about like, oh, you're talking about how you would actually change I in a string? Okay, yeah, so yeah, that question brought up, I can just go over that real quick, is how to actually change the I in a string. That might or might not be a programming assignment question. But hold on. So the only mutable values are lists. So you have many mutable values, like the variable, like it's not just lists, all right? So you have like tuples, they happen to be immutable, but you're going to learn about a lot of other data structures like dictionaries and other stuff that are mutable. It's literally anything you can change. So real quick, to actually change the value of I to a $sign in the string X, you're going to have to literally create a copy of this string, copy over character by character, but whenever you see the character you want to change, instead of copying over that original character, you're going to copy over the $sign. So real quick, for I and X, we're going to have a simple Boolean in here. So what I just said is copy over the original value. If it's not the original value and it's the value we're looking to change, which is I to a $sign, then we're going to copy over a $sign instead. So if I is equal to the character I, so I'm actually going to change the name of this. So this is going to be char. So if char, because every single iteration is going to be a single character in the string, if char is equal to I, then we are going to actually need to create a new X variable, set that equal to an empty string. We're just going to concatenate it inside this loop. So new X plus equals a $sign. Whoopsies. And then if it is not I, then you'll just say else new X plus equals that char. So just to talk about what this would do real quick, is it would pass in jing for X. Char during the first iteration will be J. Does J equal I? It does not. So it's just going to copy over new X. So after the first iteration, new X is going to equal just J. The next iteration, I, is going to be char. If does I equal I? It does. So new X is going to plus equals that $sign, like that. Then it will go to N and G with the same thing. Both of those are not equal to I, so we'll enter the else block, and it will be like that. So that's how you would actually, quote unquote, change a value. You're not really changing the value. You need to create a copy of all the original elements you want to keep and remove what you don't want to keep. Yeah, you're making a new variable. You're making a completely new string. Does that make sense to everybody? Cool. So now we're going to move on to the coding questions that I have on here, and then I can pull up that coding website. That's would that new variable become a string too after concatenation? So I already initialized it to an empty string. So it already is a string. All right, so again, I'm just gonna now go over these coding questions. I have 2 of them. They're fairly easy. Again, I have the solutions here as well that will be uploaded. I do need to fix this though. I will do that as soon as the session's over. So the first question, now let me ask you guys, do you guys want me to just go through this, or do you guys want a couple minutes to try it on your own? All right, I will give you a couple minutes. I will say though, I do not believe in editing, so the video will just be complete silence for a couple of minutes as you guys attempt it. So just to talk about the first coding question real quick. You are to determine if a squirrel party is successful or not. Here is the actual question. I'm just going to copy and paste both of them over real quick, just so I can make my coding full screen. Alrighty, so we have 2 coding questions here. I'm just going to separate them real quick. Comment them out. And then I'm going to comment this guy out. All right, I'm just going to give it a return thing because you need to have one of those or else it'll be an error. Okay, so the first question, write a program to determine if a squirrel party is successful or not. A squirrel party is successful if it has a weekends, or if it is a weekend and the number of noodles are more than 50, or it is a weekday and the number of noodles is less than 75. So as you can see here, the function signature is called squirrel party. You're given 2 parameters, a Boolean is weekend and the number of noodles, num nudes. And here are some example test cases as well that are just going based off of what is described above. So I'm going to put you guys in a little bit of a testy situation, so you guys can get used to coding with a crunch time. It is 12:51 right now. I will give you till 12:56 to grind this one out. Maybe a little more time if you guys need it, but try to put that time restraints on you guys. I'm going to be on mute, so good luck. You can ask questions in the chat, and I'll answer them if you have questions about this. Okay. Somebody asked, can we submit answer to chat when we are done? You can. I'd say submit it directly to me, and I can give you feedback. I am going to kind of treat this like the exam, though. So I'm not. If you have questions, I'm gonna kind of answer them like we would on an exam. So we're not gonna be super helpful. Somebody's asking a question about the parameter that I can't answer. Parameters is weekends, which is a Boolean true or false. True if it is a weekend, false if it's not. And num nudes is just the number of noodles that you're given. And those are the 2 parameters you need to kind of figure this question out, right? Because if it is a weekend, check the number of noodles to see if it's successful. If it's not a weekend, check the number of noodles to see if it's successful. All right. I gave you an Alex Lee video. I just can't. Yeah. Let's continue. Okay, I'll try to read this one. Alrighty, so it looks like most people, I mean, I'm getting a lot of submissions. So I'm going to, how do we get to try it out in the terminal on test day to see if we, so yeah, you can try it out in the terminal. So from what, so I don't know how it's going to be this semester, but usually your coding is going to be during your lab sessions. And it'll be similar to like programming assignments where you'll be submitting a file to Gradescope repeatedly, but you do have your text editor where you can text it locally. For those of you who don't know how to test it locally, I guess I'll show that here too, because that is something you should be comfortable with by now. So I'm going to kind of just go through what solution I saw a lot, and that was just the general structure of understanding that there are two possible cases of it returning true, and if it's not either of those two cases, then it will return false. So I'm literally going to check if is weekends and else. So in here, I'm going to check all the parameters for if it is a weekend and it is successful, and then else, this is where it's going to be not a weekend and is or is not successful. So in here, I'm going to check the number of nudes. So if num nudes is what? Greater than 50, we are going to return true. Else, I'm just going to return false out here. Same thing here. We can assume that it is a weekday now because it wouldn't enter this else block if it was a weekend. I can directly check if num nudes is less than 75. We are going to return true. And then here, I'm just going to say return false. So how are we feeling about this solution? Somebody asked, you don't have to say is weekend equals true. Yeah, we don't have to since is weekend's already a Boolean. You can just leave it as is weekend. So this is either going to be if true or if false. Technically, comparing it to true, saying like equals equals true is not wrong, but you'll be judged down the road for doing that. So yeah, this was one of many solutions. There are a lot of ways to do this. It looks like most people got it down, though. So now to test this locally, I'm going to call the function, so the function name and then the parameters that I want to pass in. And then the most important thing is that you want to print this out, because right now, Squirrel Party doesn't have any print statements. It's not printing true or false. It's returning true or false. And a return value is not going to automatically just be displayed to your standard output, which is your terminal. So you want to print the return value of this function call. So if I was to save this and run it, I have this not commented out, a random arrow. So I also print this out and run it. We get true, true, false, which is correct. Another thing I will say is that you need to do these function calls after the function definition. If like these lines were above, it would not be able to run it because it has not seen this function yet. Python starts from the top of the function and moves all the way down, or top of your file moves down. So as long as we get the correct output, you are correct, yes. Would this be the ideal answer? There is no ideal answer for this. Like, as long as it's like, I mean, most of you guys just, got the idea. How else could we do this? Well, we could, I'd say a solution I saw is literally, rather than having these nested, you could say, if is weekends and num nudes is greater than that, return true. And then you could say, elif not is weekends and num nudes is less than 75, return true. And then out here, you'll just say return false. And I'm going to fix this indentation, and you don't need any of this. So just there are a lot of ways to kind of play around this, move things around, but that's kind of just the general idea. Again, so the reason I'm kind of just slapping return false out here is because it will only reach this line of code if neither of these statements are true. So if it's not a successful party on the weekend and it's not a successful party on the weekday, then it will reach here. Because the second it reads this return statement, the function stops executing. So do we have any questions on this? It would not make a difference. So if you really wanted to have an else return false, in fact, that's probably better for readability. It kind of cleans it up a little bit, but that won't really make a difference. Cool. Again, this is going to be uploaded to Black or Piazza, so no need to frantically copy this down. Would it be possible to do if is weekend is equal to true and num nudes is greater than 50? Or yeah, that is true. You can also do that. So if you slap all of this together, so I'm just going to put these in parentheses for safety. And I did not copy that. All right. Slap all these together like this. You could do that. That is also the same thing. In fact, if you guys wanted to be really, really fancy, you could straight up say, return this line of code. Do you guys understand why? Yep, because it will literally just break everything down. So let's just look at this first test case, for instance. Is weekend is true, this will turn into true. This will turn into 63. This will turn into true. Then this will turn into true. And because this is true or this expression, it won't even check this expression, so it will just say return true. So you can, if you want it to be, a baller, you could do this. Does ands have precedence over or do you have to write parentheses just in case? Ands does have parentheses over. Actually, wait, I don't want to tell you the wrong thing. I'm going to look that up on my phone real quick. I always just personally use parentheses also for readability, but that's a good question. Does ands or take precedence in Python? It could be that they take the same precedence and it's like a left to right parsing thing, but we will see what happens, right? So it says the order is not followed by ands and then or. So that's the precedence. So ands does say precedence over or, not takes precedence over and. So it's not ands and then or. I didn't even know that. So I would have gotten that question wrong if that was a question on the exam. So Any questions on this bad boy? Cool, cool, cool. All right. So moving on to the next one, I'm just going to comment this out so it doesn't bother us when we're working down here. So this is going to be a loop question. So you're going to write a program to calculate a goofball sum. This sum, given an integer n, will do the following. It will go through the range from 1 to n, and if that number is even, add 2 to the sum. If it is odd, divide by 2. So in this case here, let's say n is equal to 7, so n is passed in as 7. You'll go through the range of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 inclusively, and you'll check each of these. 1 is odd, so you're going to divide your sum by 2. 2 is even, so you're going to divide your sum, or you're going to add to your sum. 3 is odd, so on and so forth. Does this question make sense to everybody? I see some people are already sending me submissions. So, I mean, take your time on this one. This one's a little bit harder. I'm going to give you guys till, let's do 112. So really take your time on this one. I just listen to myself. Okay. All right. Look at this. For range. All right, so I guess we're now just submitting solutions to the chat for everybody to see. So I guess we can just go over a solution. How are you guys feeling about this one? It looks like a lot of you guys got the general gist of this. You really did have to play around with the range function, understand its parameters. Still getting some solutions in. The guy who sent me one just now, that looks good, but you do need to actually return that variable at the end. You're just kind of building your sum, but you're not actually returning it. Your output is off. Well, that's okay. We're going to go over a solution right now. So the very first thing you want to do is obviously create a sum variable. So I personally wouldn't recommend just using sum because that is a keyword in Python. You technically can, but it's not good naming convention. So I'm going to set it equal to summy, set that equal to 0. And then we want to iterate from 1 to n, which is 7. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is the range or the sequence we want to generate. How do we do that? What would range 7 give us? Range 7, if we were to iterate through this, so like for I in range 7, print out I, it would give us 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. It starts at 0, guys, not 1. So the range of 7 is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So range takes 3 parameters. So it takes 3 optional parameters. It takes the start, the stop, and the step. If you feed in 1 argument, by default, it would be the stop, and this is exclusive. So that's why range 7, this is going to be considered your stop. It will stop before 7. So it will start from 0 by default, go all the way up to, but not including 7. If you added a second parameter, by default, it would be start. So if we said 1, 7, that would be the range of 1 to 6. And that is you're starting at the sequence of 1 going up to, but not including your stop, which is 7. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if we were to use a for loop with the range, yes, that is correct. We would need to use that. So, I mean, Python, C, Java, JavaScript, they all start at 0. If you really are curious why it starts at 0, I will tell you guys right now, for those of you who are really curious. So let's say you have a list, 1, 2, 3. In memory, when you say a list x's equals 1, 2, 3, you are going to have a variable x's pointing to the location in memory that the first element is located at, and it's just pointed directly to that block. So this 1 is 0 units away from the definition of x's. So that is why it is at index 0. It is 0 away from the start of x's. The 2 is 1 away from the start of the location of memory in x's. This is 2 away from the start of memory location in x's. So excuse my rambling. We will now talk about the actual solution. So now this is the third argument range could take is the step, which means you can step by a variable amount. So for instance, what happens if I add a 2 here? Increment by 2, that is correct. So it would be just be 1, 3, 5. It'd just be 1, 3, and 5. You can also, I would really recommend playing around with this. I've seen a lot of, is there such thing as a step 0? There is not. Actually, let's find that out. I'm curious what happens. Let's just range, let's just make a random range. So 1, 7, 0. There's a potential it might never enter this. So let's see what happens. So am I calling this? I'm calling this. Am I calling anything else? I'm not. Okay. Okay, there we go. That's a good question. It won't. You can't have an argument be 0. Can you have an argument be negative though? Can you have a negative step? That is correct. So what happens right now if I were to do -1 as my step? It would go backwards. Let's run this code. Nothing happens. Why is that? Because if we think about this, so this is the range 1 to 7 that we generated. We're starting at 1. We are ending at 6. And then it is going by -1. So it'll just go to 0, so on and so forth. So this range does not exist. It's not infinite, but since this range that we generated does not, like this stepping does not exist within the range or the sequence that we generated with range, it will just not even enter this loop. So now if we switch the 7 and the 1, so we started at the back and went to the 1, then it would print it in reverse. Yeah, so what that guy just posted, yeah, that would get you the reverse values if you switch the start and the step. You can also do like -2, -3. You can have a negative incrementing step as well, stuff like that. So just know that these are the 3 parameters. Know that if there's one parameter, by default is stop. If a second one's added, you have start and stop, and the third one will add step. Okay, so now moving on to the actual question that we've been trying to answer for this entire time. So as you guys have said in the chat, the range we need is going to be for I in the range of 1 to n plus 1. This just means we want to start at 1 and we want to actually include n, since n is not going to be inclusive in the range's stop. So now in here, I'm going to have an if-else statement. So if, excuse me, I modulus 2 is equal to 0, we are going to do what? So this means it's even. We're going to say summy plus equals 2, which again is equivalent to summy equals summy plus 2. And if it's not even, I'm just going to have an else block because we can assume if it's not even, it's going to be odd. I'm going to say summy divide equals by 2. So that's really all there is to it besides actually returning summy. If I can type today. All right, that's really all there is to it. I will say that this is very important that you know how to determine if a number is even or wait. So technically, I did the same thing, but my answer isn't 1.75. Could you post your code? Whoever just said that, you can send it to me directly or just post it in the group chat. It's up to you guys. What's wrong with calling the variable sum? Sum is a... Okay, so what's wrong with your code is you're starting at 0. You're including this 0, so you're adding a second 0 here. 0 modulus 2 is 0, so you're having an extra 2 added to your sum, which you don't want. That is what is wrong with your code, whoever just posted that. Sum is that's just bad naming convention. It's one of those things like that's good practice in Python. Like, you know, it's similar to like if I was to just name every single variable like a single character, so like a equals 0, a plus equals 2, like that's not super descriptive. Sum on its own is one of those words in Python that you try to avoid typically, but again, your code will still run and work, so it's really just up to you. All right, any questions about this one? Will making summy equals none also be good? So like up here, is that what you're talking about? Yeah, let's run that and see what happens. You cannot divide a none by a int. It has to be this. That's a good question, though. I feel like those are one of the like annoying questions that they would ask you on the exam. So again, this will be uploaded to Blackboard, and so will this recording, or sorry, Piazza, that Piazza posts. Any just general questions on anything? Anything we've gone over so far? Do we need to initialize I? We do not. I is automatically initialized in a for loop starting at 0. This will actually change it to 1, but by default it's just going to be 0. You do need to initialize though for a while loop if you're trying to index with a while loop. Some of you guys were asking on Piazza when you should use a while loop versus a for loop. I would personally recommend using a for loop when you have a container or range that you have to iterate through. So in this case, we knew we had a range of numbers, so just use a for loop to iterate through that sequence generated by range. Or if you have a container, so like a list, dictionary, tuple, use a for loop. And if you need to repeatedly do something until a condition is met, then you should use a while loop. Again, you can use either of them interchangeably for the time being, but that's just typically what I follow. Real quickly, because people seem to struggle with this, I know you guys won't because you guys are going to get hundreds on this exam, each and every person here. Okay, what happens right now when I print I? So that is whoever just posted that code is going to be different. So you can have an odd number that modulating by 2 doesn't equal 0. So I mean, I could come up with one in my head, but I'm not good at math. So it looks like most of you guys would have gotten this wrong. We got my guy Warren out here with the correct answer. So printing I right now would print out the indexes 0, 1, and 2. So if we were to run this code, 0, 1, and 2. All right, so it looks like other people got it right as well. But yeah, so when you have range length, it makes I be the index. So now what happens if I do this? What will happen now? Any guesses? Yes, this will print the actual elements. Good, good. So now if I was to go back to the other for loop, how can I print out the elements rather than the indexes? Yes, you guys got it. You're going to want to print out at the list x's at that specific index. So we printed out 0, 1, 2 here. This is going to print the 0th index within x's, which is apples. Then the next is 1, the first index, so on and so forth, to grab the actual thing. So know the difference between the for loops and how I changes. So I is going to be the index if you have range length. It is going to be the elements if it's just x's, if you don't have any of this fancy stuff. Do you guys have any questions on that? Excellent. So there was a question above talking about how to properly study for this midterm. I mean, what I did is I just read slides. I really hated Zybooks myself, so I tried to avoid them as much as possible. So I would just say the slides, kind of really understanding the concepts deeply. And then the website I use, which is actually the next thing we're going to do, is going to be not here. It's going to be somewhere. All right, it's right here. So if you just Google codingbat Python, click on codingbat.com Python. They just have a bunch of basic kind of beginner things here. Yeah, so I wouldn't. I have heard from different people that lists are not going to be on the exam, but loops are. So it looks like you're going to be looping through a sequence rather than an actual list. So it does give you some, you know, like the topics here, like for instance, basic string problems. Let's see what this is, for instance. The best part about this is you can type up your code here, click go, and then it actually has test cases. Given two strings, putting them together in the order A, B, B, A. Yeah, we're going to do this, guys. We are going to do this. So essentially, we are going to be given two strings, A and B, and we want to concatenate them in the order A, B, B, A. So hi and bye, this is A, this is B. We want to do hi, bye, bye, hi, and return that string. All right, yeah, so we already have the answer in the group chat. All right, so we're not going to do this one. So yeah, we just return A plus B plus B plus A. Let's move down a little bit. Maybe these are harder. Given two strings, return their concatenation, except omits the first char of each. Ooh, this could be interesting. Do you guys want to attempt this one? This might be a little challenging, but it's up to you guys. All right, so yes, we're going to attempt this one. I'm going to give you guys more time. I'll give you guys until 1:35, and then we're going to go through this together. And no posting answers in the chat, please. Just directly message it to me. I'm going to go ahead and venture out here. I'm going to go ahead and restrict the use of slicing for this problem, just to make you guys work a little bit harder. Wait, what even is the answer here? Hello there. What was your item? So somebody asked me privately any tips on how to tackle coding problems. So I think it really is just a learning curve. For me personally, I had no experience going into 112 of like any type of coding whatsoever. So it was kind of just like me forcing myself to code until it just happens. But like once it clicks for you, it's going to just be so much easier. So it's really just practice, I'd say. So like this website, if you just like keep forcing yourself to try to do it, like redo old programming assignments, stuff like that. It's like a learning curve. It happens quicker for some people than others, but for me, it did take I think like after midterm one, I was like struggling so hard, but then it just clicked, and then I was like completely fine. So it's all about that learning curve. All right, you guys have one more minute, and then we're just gonna walk through a solution. These are funny. What's in the blank part? Apparently, it's not a thing anymore. Uh, all right, so it looks like some of you guys were able to get this one, others not. So this does kind of have to do with what I was talking about earlier, where in order to create this sort of thing, you are going to have to create a new string that copies over what you want. So for those of you who kind of missed that little spiel I had at the beginning, might have struggled a little more on this one, but now we're all going to work through this together. Some of you guys did use some super fancy like dot pops and slicing, and like I even saw some enumerations in here. I'm just going to do the very basic way because I guarantee you on the exam they're going to tell you go ahead and hit you with all those like no slicing, no pops, no enumeration, stuff like that. Um, you guys don't even have like you guys aren't technically even supposed to learn enumeration in this class, so we're just going to do a very basic solution here, and that solution, the algorithm I sort of thought of is, well, we're literally just iterating through this string to build what we want, and then this string. So I literally just have one loop dedicated here and then one loop dedicated here. So we'll call this loop A, and we just need to play around with the range, right? So I'm going to first create an answer string, set that equal to an empty string so I can concatenate to it. And I'm going to say for I in range 1, comma, the length of A. So what is this doing? This is skipping over the first character because we want to. We're starting at index 1 rather than index 0. Since the H is at index 0, we're going to start the E. We're going to go to the length of A, which is going to take us to the very end of the string. Then we're simply going to do answer plus equals A at the index I. And then we're going to do the exact same thing for the string B right here. So the length of B, I'm going to change this to J, and I'm going to change this to B, and I'm going to change this to J to be consistent with what we're doing. And then we're just going to return our answer. Now, hopefully this will pass all the tests. I have compile problems because I cannot type. We're going to try this again. And look at that. We passed all of the test cases. So yeah, it is pretty cool how they offer test cases with this website. That's very helpful. Do you guys have any questions on this bad boy? Any questions at all? For the sake of this class, if it tells you to return none, I wouldn't I wouldn't just use none for fun, you know? So like if it says if let's say the parameter is not an integer, return none, just return none. I'd kind of stay away from none right now for this class. Yeah, so if you were to put a 0 here, it would include the first character, but this range is equivalent to just not even having the 0 there. So that's kind of redundant because by default it is 0. That was a question that was directed to me. Can't use pop for the so we can't use pop, but they put it in the Zybooks. Which ones do I need to know right now? So, or which ones do I not need to know right now? So you should know all the basic ones like dot remove, dot appends, dot inserts. Like you should know the big ones. I know Zybooks dives into like 50 built-in methods. Know the big ones, but on the programming questions, they're going to be super specific on what you can and can't use. So for this one, it will give the description, and then it'll likely say like you are not allowed to use slicing, enumeration, dot pop, stuff to make it super easy. Somebody asked why I'm doing plus equals here. So adding a string, you can add strings together with string concatenation. So in this loop, I'm repeatedly adding the characters I want to answer. So during this iteration, answer is first an empty string. And then if we had the string hello, it's going to start with the E because we're skipping over the first, the 0th index. And then the E is going to be added to answer. Then the L is going to be added to answer. So it's just repeatedly plus equaling. This is the same exact thing as answer equals answer plus a bracket I. So somebody just asked me why you would want to use a tuple instead of a list, aside from the facts that one mutable and one isn't. What is an example in which we should use a tuple instead of a list? So this is a kind of deeper question. I'm always happy to answer them though. So it really depends on what data you're working with. Let's say you have let's say you want to store passwords, for instance. Do you want the passwords to change while you're storing them in your database? Like, do you want your users' passwords to change? Do you want to like lose some passwords? You do not. So you're definitely going to want to have an immutable data structure. So in case a line of code accidentally tries changing it, it'll crash with an error. A tuple is essentially a list that is immutable. So rather than the square brackets like this, so if we had the list 1, 2, 3, the tuple would just be 1, 2, 3, and this is immutable. So you can't change any of these elements, but you can change, remove, add elements to this. No problem. Does anybody have any like last minute things you want to go over? There's about 18 minutes left. Questions about anything except projects that's out right now. I cannot answer those questions. What's our thing that will return false? Let's play through those real quick. So let us find out. So if 0, we're going to print banana. Else, we are going to print water. All right, what is the output of this, guys? We have banana. It is water, because any non-zero value in Python is going to be true. Any 0 value is going to be false. So this is going to essentially say if false, so it's going to print out water. I talked more about this earlier in my video for those of you who came late. This is actually part of the multiple choice, so it's kind of at the beginning. You should probably know about this stuff. So what about if 0.5? What do we think about this? Water or banana? We have people saying banana. It is correct because this is not 0. What about negative 30? For this, there are no inputs. We're literally just running code. Yes, this should return banana because, again, this is not 0. All right, what about an empty list? An empty list returns water because this is considered kind of like a quote-unquote 0 value. It's going to be seen as 0. So an empty list, an empty dictionary, empty tuple, they'll all return false. However, what about this? Water or banana? False. Yeah, so false is the second line. If I mean, I'm not sure what you mean by false is the second line. So like if this is false, then it will go to the else block. So we have some conflicting answers here. Let's go ahead and run this. We get banana because this is not an empty list. This is a list within a list. Okay, so just to talk about what is happening right here. In Python, any non-zero or non-empty value is considered true. So values like 0 or an empty list, an empty tuple, or that's an empty dictionary, an empty tuple, an empty string even, these will all be false if directly evaluated like this in Python. Any non-empty ones of these, so even an empty list with an empty list, -50, 0.1, they're all going to be true if just evaluated on its own. So this is just simply evaluating on its own. You're not comparing it to anything, it's just if and then value. So somebody asked me about my VS Code terminal. I personally use Git Bash because it's Unix based. So it's essentially what's happening with Mac and Linux. But I mean, you can just go here and then you can select what you want. There's also the command prompts if you truly want to use that. It's just a personal preference. It really doesn't matter what you use. And I mean, to open the terminal, you just go here and then go to terminal, new terminal. So if you put any number besides 0, you get water. That is correct. Any number besides 0, you get water. Oh, wait. Any number besides 0, you get banana. Zero will give you water. Zero is false, yes. Color-coded headings and a neater is neater than mine. So I'm actually not sure. Are you talking about specifically my terminal here? Whoever's DMing me. Yeah, so this is, are you using Git Bash? Like what are you on right now? Are you on a Mac, Linux, Windows? So yeah, you have a terminal then. I'm using Git Bash, so it's looking like this. You can change it in your settings. I'm not exactly how to do that with that. Why does 0 give you banana? 0 does not give you banana. 0 will give you water because 0 and any of these like empty things are considered false. So if it said if 0, that's if false. So it's not going to enter here. It's going to enter the else block. I would recommend everybody downloads Visual Studio Code because it is the coolest and everybody uses it. Also, where are my extensions at? Oopsies. Also, you can have VS Code pets. So you can have this little cat down here while you code. Hold on. More questions. So banana will be with 1, 2, 3. Yeah, so literally any number, floats, like anything will that's not 0. So 0.00001, that will be true. But 0 will give you false. If there is an empty space inside an empty list, will it be considered empty? What do you guys think? Is this right here, if I added a space here, is this an empty list? Some people say yes, some people say no. Well, let's find out. So will this print banana or water? Water. It is still empty because this is, I mean, this is an empty list, you know. If we were to add like a space string in here, that would be a whole different story. It does have to have quotations to be considered a space. You could add just like a bunch of spaces in here and this will still be empty. No problems. We got 10 minutes left. Last minute questions. I will also post a link to that website that I was on with all those coding questions on that Piazza post. Can you explain or within an if-else statement? All right, so let's say we have a string called myString. I'm going to set that equal to apple. We do not like apples for some reason, so if myString, or let's say we only like apples or oranges. So if myString equals apple or myString equals orange, we are going to print yum. And if it's not, we are going to print yuck. So when this code is ran, the way Python works is it'll plug in myString for that. It'll say, okay, apple equals apple. This is going to evaluate to true. It's not even going to read what's on the right side of this, and it's just going to print yum. So granted, if this somehow ended up being false, let's say this is orange, it will still read this side. It will say false, but then it will continue to check the other side to look for that true because only one side needs to be true. And then yuck obviously will happen if it's not apple or orange. Now let me ask you guys a question really quickly. What is the output of this code if I run? We got some yums. We got some yucks. So this is going to be yum. In fact, anything I set myString to, as long as it's like syntactically correct, will print yum because of this. This is not being compared to anything, and it is a non-empty string, so this will always be true. And actually, I mean, I was supposed to change this back to myString, my bad. But in fact, that might be why you guys said true, yum. But this right here will always be yum because it will check this. Does toes equal apple? That is false. Does orange equal an empty string? It does not. So that is true, and it will always enter yum. So no matter what we enter for myString, it can be a list. It can be whatever you want. That's syntactically correct. It will always enter this if statement. That was actually very similar to the multiple choice question that I talked about earlier in this video. So I think I saw a couple questions above. What do you mean by empty string? An empty string is literally just that. That is what an empty string is. So overall, if 0, empty string, blah, are considered false, and so you get water, if 1, 2, 3, etc. are considered true, you get banana. Yes, that is correct. The person who sent me that DM, I did not miss that. Same with if you just threw anything in the list or the dictionary or the set, that will be considered true. Any questions on this? We got 7 minutes, guys. Last minute questions. You can DM me. There's no such thing as a stupid question. Let me switch forward myself. Okay. Alrighty, somebody's still confused why it is yum. I will explain that again real quick. Let's see what, so real quick, I'm just trying to go in order of these questions. Somebody asked why, like, again, why this is happening. So any non-zero value in Python is going to be true, including, like, when I say non-zero, a zero value could be like an empty string, an empty list, an empty tuple. So in this case, this is not an empty string. We are not comparing this string to anything. For this code to be correct, it should say my string equals orange. That is actually going to check to see if the string equals orange. But in this case here, even if we had toes, it'll check, does toes equal apple? It does not, so that is going to be false. Is orange, that it's literally just going to check if orange. This is considered true since it's a non-empty string, so that is going to be true. So any syntactically correct thing you sub in for my string is always going to print young. Let's see. For the test, do we have to use Notepad so you can use VS Code? Just they're going to be walking around making sure you don't have those beefy debuggers. Any other like looking at slides? So I personally literally just use CodingBat and I was fine. CodingBat does have a lot of questions. After 112 though, you can try going onto LeetCode. That's kind of what you're going to have to be grinding for like the rest of your life. Thank you for all the detail. Oh, you're welcome. Anytime, guys. Say you get false and false. Would this be true? False and false is false. The only way and is evaluated to true if both arguments are true. I believe you're thinking of another bitwise operator that I am not remembering right now, which returns true only if both arguments are true, but that's not what you guys have to learn in this class. So if it is true once, then the whole statement is true. Yes. Somebody dropped all in there. That could be it. All right, guys, 4 minutes. All right. Yeah, I mean, you guys can leave at any time. Some people are asking me if they can leave. Like, you could have left like whenever you wanted to. I'm gonna drop a recording of this probably in like, I don't know, like half an hour. It's gonna be on the same Piazza post that the midterm exam evaluations are gonna be. Like the midterm Piazza post. You guys know what I'm talking about. Hope you guys have a good weekend. Everybody get 100 on this exam. No problem, no problem. So the person who says, do you say that string returns true? Yes. I agree that VS Code pet extension is life-changing. Because the reason that returns true is because that is not an empty string that has a space character in it. That is still considered a character. Okay, as someone who is not a CS, I shouldn't be reading this out loud. But has to take my man, no, you're taking code classes. Okay, so that person who sent me the direct message about taking coding classes. I mean, if you want to have a coding job, I'd recommend doing that. There are I know a lot of math majors that what became software engineers and stuff like that, like because they also took coding classes. I mean, I personally suck at math, so that's something I would have not done if I was a math major. I'd have to focus on math. But I mean, if you want to, man, 112 is probably the easiest course you're gonna face because it is the basic one. It picks up pretty quickly. Like 211 picks up pretty quickly. 310 is a hard class. 262 is in C, and C sucks. So it's really just up to you. So you should never use Notepad++, in my opinion. It's just gross. It's not as cool as this. You look cooler here. But also Notepad++, it has that really annoying like mixed spacing tab error that I really just don't like. I don't know when your midterm is, but if you're comfortable with Notepad++, I wouldn't try switching to VS Code right before the midterm, maybe afterwards. There isn't much of a difference, but I mean it's up to you. It's Thursday, Friday. I mean, again, it's up to you. If you want to try, you can, but I'd really just focus on studying rather than getting a cooler place to code. Alrighty, guys, it is 2 o'clock. I am going to end this meeting. Thank you all for coming out, and I'm going to upload this probably before 3 o'clock. So on that one Piazza posts.